Welcome to our interview series at the Nutanix Cloud Together Summit. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and we're here with Dan Fallon, the Senior Director for U.S. Public Sector Engineering at Nutanix. Dan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Dan, I'd like to start by asking, from your perspective and from more of an engineering perspective, where is the federal government in its journey to the cloud?
Yeah, that question can encompass a lot, but I think looking at the highlights, they're into the journey, but still a ways to go. So there are a lot of different ways to measure that, by agency, by spend, by data. But if you look at probably one of the easier ways, just by spend, the cloud spend in the federal government is still a small fraction of the overall IT spend. But on the other side, we've been doing this for almost a decade now with the going back to the cloud first mandate. And I think, what that highlights is it's not an overnight journey, especially for the federal government. It's obviously a multi-decade journey is what we're getting in the second decade here of the cloud journey. But I think even for an individual agency, it's going to be a multi-year journey. So agencies, the ones that haven't started and even the ones that are maybe into the process, need to understand that it is a multi-year process. It's not going to be something that happens overnight. So you need to plan for that. I think the other thing is the ability to learn from the agencies that have gone before you, because there are a lot out there that have gone into the cloud, and then there's still others that are starting to dip their toe. So there are a lot of lessons learned, best practices out there that people can pick up from, because over that span of years, we've adjusted policy. The federal government has moved from cloud first to cloud smart, and there have been different architectures and newer technology and solutions to make it easier. So even though we're not done by any means, I think the kind of the ease of getting to cloud is the barriers a little lower, but it's still important. What I always emphasize as agencies start to look at their journey to cloud is to make sure to understand that it is an operational model. It's not a destination. So you can't just move all of your IT from here to there and say you're done. It's really changing how you operate. And once that's a big endeavor, but once you get there, you realize a lot of benefits and efficiencies.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly one thing we've seen recently compared to just even a couple of years ago is the emphasis to evolve towards more of a hybrid or a multi-cloud model, as well as finding the right balance between cloud and on-prem. How are you seeing agencies responding to that notion of adopting a hybrid cloud model?
Yeah, I think we've clearly just, obviously by the government policy adjustment, we've transitioned to cloud smart, and really what that means, if you look at the broader landscape and the industry analysts like Gartner and Forrester, in what the commercial sector is doing as well, is it means there are going to be multiple clouds. There's going to be a variety of locations for your IT environment that needs to all be stitched together. So that's likely multiple SaaS services, so multiple offerings you're buying as software like email, Office 365, and then multiple public cloud services you're using. And there's probably still, I think, a lot of, part of Cloud Smart was coming to terms with the fact that unlikely, especially the big agencies, will be able to go 100% into any one environment. So you're probably still going to have some services, applications running back in your data center, old mainframes that it takes forever to migrate. There's data concerns or other reasons like security that some things may stay in the data center, but you need all this to work together and be able to communicate. So I think we're seeing that realization. We're seeing people understand that they can't put all their eggs in one basket. They need to look at multiple cloud providers. There's a benefit to doing that from a cost perspective too, as well. There's also different, just like you have different tools, and there are different cloud providers that excel in different workloads. So there are a lot of different options when you look at the big public cloud providers. And then I think the next thing is we're starting to see agencies look at how to manage this together. So their contracts coming out for cloud management platforms. So being able to stitch everything together, because that with the benefits, you have some added complexity once you understand that you're going to end up in multiple different cloud entities. So you need a platform to be able to manage that all together, so that your operational model doesn't become overly complex and eliminate all those benefits. So you need to make sure you control that cloud sprawl, as we call it, when you go into the hybrid and multi-cloud world.
Absolutely. Well, shifting gears just a little, given the major cyber incidents over the past year or past couple of years, how should agencies look to secure their cloud and multi-cloud environments?
Yeah, obviously, it seems like every week there's another headline, either in the commercial space or the federal space. I also cover the state and local government market as well, and there's a lot in that space as well. I think the name of the game is zero trust. It almost gets used as a buzzword, but it's really a methodology for redesigning your security architecture and posture in your environment. So there's a lot that's been published, especially over the last year. NIST has a standard, and then NSA published their zero trust guidance. So there's a lot of documentation out there. You can go to kind of Google's been doing it for a while. They have stuff on their site as well. And we're starting to see early pilots for zero trust. It really, just like we talked about cloud being an operational model, zero trust is changing how you do security. And it's moving from this perimeter defense of, oh, once they breach that perimeter, everything's exposed, to making sure that the network, everything is isolated. Things like microsegmentation come into play, authentication. So every time someone's accessing files, data, applications, there's authentication to make sure they should have that access. So there are a lot of different things that need to be implemented. Zero trust there's no silver bullet. You can't buy one solution and say, oh, I now have zero trust. It's really a redesign of your security model. It needs to come into play, especially when you look at cloud and hybrid cloud, because you now have data across multiple environments. So it's no longer in one boundary. That old model of, oh, I have a big firewall boundary to get into my data center. That doesn't work, because you have apps living outside of your data center. And you have the remote workforce that's come with COVID. So you now have people operating from anywhere, accessing data that may be in the cloud or your on-prem environment. So you really need to isolate each of those boundaries and be able to have the control, encrypt the data, be able to segment your network, and really get ahead of all these threats, the cyber threats and the Fed world and the ransomware that seems to be everywhere these days.
Absolutely. And then lastly, Dan, you get to see kind of a big picture view of what's going on in the markets. What are the biggest trends that you think agencies should anticipate coming with regard to the cloud?
Yeah, I think data will, in a single, I guess you didn't ask me to, but in a single word, data is going to be the trend that continues to grow. We're starting to see agencies it's kind of a newer workload for Nutanix. I mean, data lakes aren't necessarily new, but we're starting to see agencies virtualize those, things that may have been not as prevalent, something that wasn't modernized. We're starting to see that brought forward, because data is becoming the core of not just the IT enterprise, but really the way agencies and businesses operate. There's so much data out there. I mean, cliche example, but COVID and just all the dashboards that every municipality is now operating, as well as the federal government, all this data that's being presented. And that's just one example. So I think organizations are just starting to get their handle around, all right, we need to be able to have central repositories for data, creating those data lakes and designing that solution. And that's really still in the early stages. There are different ways to do that. That's starting now. And then I think as that develops and people, get their arms around the data in the environment and kind of have a single spot. Once you have it in one location, then you can analyze it. So that's where we get into machine learning, artificial intelligence, where you can actually take action on the data. And just endless possibilities there in terms of what you can do once you start digging through these the piles of data. So I think there's a lot of potential there. Interesting field of data science and in doing analytics, because it's really bridging the IT with the business, and it just brings IT to the forefront because they're the ones kind of holding that data, and then we get back into the zero trust of security. So it's all got to be secure as well. So there's just, there's so many things that it all wraps together. So I think that'll be interesting trends in the years to come to see how that develops, and just all the different technology in the outcomes the agencies are able to develop on top of the data.
Absolutely. Well, Dan Fallon, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to share your insights with us.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for our audience for tuning in.